Yeah. Go big or go home. Get your game face on. I need a seat on that throne. Go. Yeah. Leave it all on the floor. If there's a knock on the door, don't leave us in. We them boys. Let's go.
Go big or go home from Minneapolis. Ahmed Fareed, Matt Cassel, Joshua Perry. Food everywhere.
Everywhere.
Fruit,
Hungry.
salami, more fruit.
You know, these days it feels like we never eat. Like, even though there's food available all the time, for some reason we're always watching a game or doing something and we don't eat.
What's the reason?
Just because you're watching your slim figure.
It's a bathroom situation.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Welcome to the podcast. You never know when you're gonna be able to find a bathroom. That is true. You want to keep the liquids and solids to a bare minimum.
More the porta potties.
It's mostly the solids.
Yeah. Okay. Welcome to the program. So we were in and out of our truck where we watched the games. We were doing the halftime for Rutgers and Wisconsin. We were doing the pregame and halftime for Iowa, Purdue, and then we did the pregame, halftime, and postgame for our Big Ten Saturday night game of Michigan, Minnesota. Our promise to you, as always, we will go through all the games and update you on our thoughts, our takeaways. Might be a little different from the national takeaways, but that's what we do here on this podcast. So let's just start, guys, with our Big Ten Saturday night game. That is Michigan dominating Minnesota, just dominating. So they've been competing for the Little Brown Jug since 1909. Minnesota has not won the trophy at home since 1977. And that was before PJ Fleck was born. Like, he was not even around. I actually wasn't around then. You guys weren't around then.
No, I was not.
None of us existed.
Nope.
The last time they won at home, and that streak continues. Joshua, the word that we've used for Michigan is like suffocating. Like, offensively and defensively, they suffocate, and I think that's what they did again today.
Right, and they really didn't pull away in the first half, like in a sense where you said that Minnesota was out of the game. Like, you felt like there were pathways back. And then the second half comes around, and Minnesota has 7 total yards in the third quarter, and Michigan's able to put 21 points on the board, and then all of a sudden it's like, all right, well, this game ended, and it got kind of ugly. But it never feels flashy. It never feels explosive. It just feels like they bludgeon you play after play after play until you look up and all of a sudden it's like, this game is super out of hand. And I think that's the way that they like to win. I think it's a good formula for them because everybody has to be a part of that. It's not like other systems where, you know, you're reliant on solely takeaways defensively, and if you can't get it, you're going to give up a ton of yards. Or you got to have a quarterback who's spinning the rock for 400 yards a week. They don't need any of that. They just need guys to show up and do their job.
And it's the unselfish nature of this team. We talked about their depth, and you also talked about the physical brand that they play with, the identity, but they have such buy-in by everybody on that team. We talked about in the post game today, they brought 74 players on this trip, 73 were able to play.
I mean, that's
an insane stat right there.
Insane stat of the game.
They said only the backup snapper, long snapper, was the only guy. I was like, could you throw him a bone, coach? Just get him in there.
Put him in there. Linebacker.
Right, put him in there, special teams, linebacker, something like that. But that's their recipe for success. They sometimes it's not a blowout in the first, but it always feels like they're in control of that game. Then all of a sudden they get to the second half and they just wear you down play after play on both sides of the ball. And look, they found this formula. Everybody's bought in, and they just absolutely dominated once again the second half. This is a second half team we talk about all the time, Joshua.
Yep.
This Big Ten is so strange this year, I feel like, because the top 3. And maybe it's just Michigan that's so far separated from everyone else, because we'll get to Ohio State, and that game was maybe closer than a lot of people thought. But it just does seem you have 3 teams that are in the top 10, and then you have everyone else. And I don't know if that's the way it's going to be for the rest of the year, but that's just the way it feels every time Michigan steps on the field for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I said it before the game, and then even after seeing this game, and I know Georgia played extremely well. So this is not necessarily a Georgia take. This is more of a Michigan take. I think that they're the best team in the country because of the complete nature of how they play. They don't put too much on any singular player's plate. They have been dominant in all of their wins, and I know people will say, who have the wins come against? And my response to that is, we've seen teams struggle with teams that they're not supposed to really struggle with. Like, they don't give teams life that shouldn't have life. And I think that's a part of my evaluation up to this point. In November, their schedule gets more difficult, so I guess we'll see then. But until we see it, like, I have no reason to believe that this team is not the best in the country right now.
Right. I mean, they're playing like it. And then Georgia comes out and puts up, a 50 burger today as well. Carson Beck looked good. He spread the wealth around. It wasn't just with the Brock Bauer show. They got everybody else involved. And so, again, this midpoint of the season, you haven't totally hit your stride. And the thing about a team like Georgia, they're going to get the benefit of the doubt. They're two-time national champion, and they definitely aren't going to take a slide. But Michigan has a case for that number one spot, the way that they're dominating teams and the physicality that they play with.
They gave up 169 yards total offense to Minnesota, 2 pick sixes. So their defense outscored them. Their defense outscored them 12-10 if you don't even count the extra points. Michigan has won 17 straight conference games, second longest run in program history. They continue to roll. We wish they kept it a little closer. I think the ratings probably would be a little bit better if this game was closer in the fourth quarter.
I think half the stadium was gone after that third.
They had seen enough. So another dominant victory for Michigan. Ohio State, on the other hand, this was a battle of undefeated teams, though. Maryland goes into Columbus. Maryland's played Ohio State pretty close last couple of years, or at least last year. Ohio State was only up by 3, Joshua, in the fourth quarter. They end up winning 37-17. What's your big takeaways from this contest?
My takeaway is that I feel like, and I am probably the most guilty of this, we judge Ohio State so hard because of what they have been as a program for the last decade plus, right? And I'm going back to when Urban first came in and I was a freshman, and it was a 12-0 season, just like 50 wins over a 4-year span at that point, and they continued that. And so you look at a game like this and they're struggling with Maryland, and they're like, wow, this is not supposed to be like this. And I would say, yes, it's probably not supposed to be like that. Talent differential, resource differential, all those things. Also look at Maryland and say there's a reason that they came into this game undefeated, and they had played really good football up to that point. And so you end the game with a 20-point win in conference. Like, we're going to litigate it based off of how the game actually went, which is it's not good enough. And Ohio State certainly has deficiencies they have to work on. But it's also hard to win by 20 in an ugly game. And I think that's the thing about this team is, like, even when it's ugly, sometimes it's still like a really good result. And so they have to figure out how to not make a game like this as ugly as it was for 3 quarters.
But this is a good football team. And a lot of people, maybe Maryland, you look at them and you say they're understated, they're not ranked and all this stuff, but they're playing good football. Talia Tagovailoa is probably one of the best, if not the best quarterback in all of the Big Ten. And so they went out and they scored early, but it was the response factor. It was the 2 turnovers on defense, getting the interceptions when they needed to, and then closing out the game in the fashion that they did, scoring 17 points in the fourth quarter. That speaks a lot to this team and their resiliency. And so you're going to have these teams, especially when you get into conference play, that are familiar with each other. They play each other every single year. They know your tendencies. And sometimes it's not going to be just a blowout because you're a better team or you've got a bigger brand. It's going to be a dogfight for a little while. You figure it out, but it's how you close out these type of games. And they did that today.
I would say the biggest thing, if I'm evaluating this Ohio State team, is I don't think they did a very good job up front, particularly on offense. I think the defensive front was leaky in the first half, and they got that cleaned up. Offensively, the fact that you go out there and you average, 1.9 yards per rush, it's unacceptable regardless of who you're playing against.
They weren't able to run the football.
Right. The flip side of that is Kyle McCord started off real slow. You look up at the end of the game, 66% completion, 320 yards and a couple of touchdowns.
Right.
Found Marvin Harrison Jr. a ton.
Which is a smart thing to do.
Right. And just give him the rock.
I think they have to be more complimentary. But when one thing's not working, the idea that you can go to the other thing, I think, stands out to me.
Yeah, they didn't have Travion Henderson, who was out in this game. So, yeah, they had 33 rushes for only 62 yards, a slog on the ground for Ohio State. But Kyle McCord goes for over 300 yards, 163 of those yards to Marvin Harrison Jr. And the defense, our producer notes here, the Ohio State defense has held its first 5 opponents to 17 points or less for the first time since 2007. So they are not leaky, at least in the giving up points department.
Right. And when you think about the offense, too, the areas of concern that you look at when you go back and you watch the film, they're 3 of 12 on third down. They had 10 penalties in this game, 81 yards total. That speaks to me that there was some sloppy play. So Ryan Day is going to go in there and get after them and say, hey, we got to correct these things because this will get us beat down the road against a better team. But you've got to be better on third down. You've got to correct the penalties without a doubt.
I would say this last thing too is, I think in the game, everything feels like it's magnified when you're watching Ohio State, because if you would ask me, I would have said that it felt like their pass defense got exposed at times, and Maryland's got really good offensive skill, like really good. Gave up under 200 yards passing.
Right.
That's a good performance.
Yep.
Yeah. Couple interceptions there for Talia, and Ryan Day got his 50th win in his 56th game.
Impressive.
It's not good enough for Ohio
It's
State.
unbelievable.
That's why I keep
it's wacky.
The standard is ridiculous. Yeah.
What do we think about Maryland? Because they're going to play. Who else do they have on the schedule? I know they have Michigan coming up still.
Yeah, they got Penn State.
Got
They
Penn
also have
State
Penn
still.
State.
Yeah.
Do you think they win one of those two games?
I mean, it feels like they can, right? Like this was nasty for over 3 quarters, and I think that for Penn State at least, I feel like that would be the most gettable. Michigan seems like they're the most built to do this,
but it's a trap situation kind of for Michigan,
right?
right? It's in
Yeah,
between
it's the
Penn
week
State
before,
and Ohio State,
in
so
between.
that could be tough.
No, to answer your question, I think very highly of Maryland. I think highly of Mike Locksley as a head coach and how he's built it and what he's done to kind of flip the mentality of that locker room and those players. I think is really impressive.
All right, so let's go out west now, because that is a free-for-all. That's up for grabs, but maybe some more clarity after this week's game. Wisconsin on homecoming beats Rutgers on Peacock. They're the 3rd team in Big Ten history to win 400 conference games. So congratulations, Badgers, on that one. They're 5-0 all-time now versus Rutgers. They have outscored them in total 192-43. So in historical sense, this was actually a pretty good performance from Rutgers, it seems like. And it was kind of a grind. It was funny, Matt, because we were watching it. We were like, what do we pick for our halftime analysis? We're like, there's nothing so far.
Right.
And then the run game got going, and it was not Braylon Allen. It was Jackson Akers.
Yes.
Correct? Do I have that right? Yeah, Jackson Aker, 13 carries, 65 yards. It was like Aker came in, and then Allen fumbled, but then he was mad, and he came in and had a touchdown.
Right.
So it was like Wisconsin, it seemed like late in that first half, got the running game going, and then they were able to dominate.
Yeah, and Akers came in and gave them a spark, right? They started to run the ball efficiently and effectively, get ahead on down and distance, and that's when you see it. It gives the offense confidence. When you can run the football and put yourself in the manageable 3rd down situations, that's what really gets the momentum going. Braylon Allen, like you said, he fumbled. They're going in for another score. He fumbles, but then he comes right back, has a great rush in there for a touchdown. So, I mean, this was a game that felt like Wisconsin was in control. The Rutgers couldn't get anything really going in terms of offense. I mean, Gavin Wimsatt finished with 181 yards. He also threw an interception, but he also was the leading rusher for the Rutgers. So when you look at that, you go, man, that's a lot to put on one man who's still developing, still learning. We wanted to see him use his legs. But Wisconsin, they grinded it out, got the win, and it's a good win for this program.
I think the interception really killed Rutgers and Wimsatt, because that was an area where they were driving, and it was close to the end of the first half, I believe. Hallman for Rutgers did a great job, took it back to the crib, like 96 yards or something crazy like that.
Yep.
So good defensive play, but I think that was kind of the backbreaker, because you could have talked me into a situation where Rutgers gets on the board, scores a touchdown, and it gives them more juice and more of a spark and ability to compete.
It's
in that
10-7 at half instead of now you're down 17-0.
And it becomes really difficult to try to claw your way back into that. I think this is a very improved Rutgers football team. I always talk about their season as a race to 6 games. Like, can you get to bowl eligibility? And I think they'll figure it out this year. But for Wisconsin also, man, when that ground game is going, and I don't give a damn whether you want air raid or you want air raid concept or whatever it is, they got to get those backs going.
And they, you know what, they rushed for over 200 yards today. And again, Tanner Mordecai he hasn't been as productive in the air and throwing the ball, but what he has done is utilize his legs. And you see it in the zone read, and also when things aren't open downfield, he's been able to take off and get those yards that you need and extend drives. And so that's kind of been their recipe, though. They haven't been as effective and efficient in terms of the pass game, but the run game, when they get that going and they can play good defense, that's going to be the recipe for success.
You're mad at Tanner Mordecai when he doesn't run. sometimes. You get upset. You're like, use that part of your game.
Well, you kind of have to. I mean, it seems like he'll get back in the pocket and he'll hold it for a little while. But I'm like, no, take off and run. If nobody's open, he's got that skill set to change the game and what it looks like back there. And then what happens is they've got to start loading the box, and you get more one-on-one opportunities for those wide receivers. It works hand in hand.
I felt so good coming into our truck this weekend because I was like, I think I know who the best running back is in the Big Ten. I go, my guy, Kyle Monungai at Rutgers.
Yeah, you
did.
did.
Yes,
and
you did.
Wisconsin holds him to 8 carries and 16 yards. I put the jinx on him. I put the jinx on my
Yeah, that's your
definitely
fault.
did.
You should
That's your
apologize
fault.
to him.
I should not do that.
You
Give
should
him a
write him a
call.
letter.
I like him so
Text him.
much. He just ran into a tough defense
Yeah,
here
he did.
today. We'll see if he can bounce back. Coming up, Iowa's going to play at Wisconsin next weekend. I mean, this could decide the Big Ten West because Iowa got a win against Purdue 20-14, seen live on Peacock. Iowa is 5-1, but they are now averaging under 22 points per game. So that watch is continuing, but it is another win. And what was the final numbers for Deacon Hill, their starting quarterback?
29%.
Yeah, 6 for 21.
What is
for
that? 29%.
Yep.
And he's the winning starting quarterback in his first career start at Iowa.
Yep.
Mhm.
That's all it took because they got the running game going with Caleb Johnson.
It was
Thankfully,
nice to see him
just
back.
think like he came back from an ankle injury. He was out since week 2, I think. If he doesn't come back, he goes for 134 yards. This Iowa offense is even worse.
Yeah, he was a big part of this victory today. He ran tough. The offensive line, I thought it did a really good job in the run game, not maybe so much in the pass game, but the fact that he was able to be a spark plug for this offense, they needed it because other than that, they weren't able to generate anything in terms of a passing offense.
I mean, 8 yards per carry is a ridiculous number
It
for
is.
Caleb Johnson. So certainly they're glad to have him back. I think besides the 29% and, 1 touchdown, 1 interception for the winning quarterback of that game, the most interesting passing stat is that he did not complete a singular pass to a wide receiver. Eric All, the tight end, had 5 receptions, and Caleb Johnson, the running back, had 1. Those were the 6 completions. Amazing how you could go a whole game without completing a pass to a wide receiver.
Yeah. Eric All 5 catches, 97 of the 110 yards that Deacon Hill. Deacon Hill, first career start.
Yes,
obviously still young,
Yes.
but man, he assess him. What do you see?
It was a tough day. There's no doubt about it. And it's one of those situations when you watch him, he's got a big, strong arm. He stands tall in the pocket, but then there's obviously an issue with accuracy because when you watch him, he just never looks comfortable. I don't know if he's rushing his throws, but it was not a pretty day to say the
Every
least.
throw is 98.
98 degrees. I mean, 98 miles an hour for sure.
You pointed out actually something I think points to his inexperience because they were in the red zone and they had the running back right out of the backfield right away.
It was a hot.
Yes, and you were saying that his first read is the will linebacker.
Right.
And if the will linebacker is coming, he's not taking that, like you got to throw that right now. And he wasn't even looking at it.
Right. You're hot off that will linebacker, and it was a red zone play. Running back free releases up, kind of like it's not really a wheel as much as it is. He's going to free release almost to the flat and try to go vertical. And when you see him, you're like, he's your key to start that linebacker. As soon as he fires, he's your hot route. And he was looking over the middle to some mesh route and he was trying to let it develop. But this guy's breathing down your throat. There's no way you can hold on to that ball. And so it's a learning experience. He'll go back, he'll review the film, and he'll sit there. And hopefully by next week, these experiences, these game time experiences is when you grow the most because there's no substitute for the speed of a game and seeing it on the fly and understanding, hey, I've got to make that adjustment right now and know your keys.
Yeah, the Iowa defense, though, I mean, strong again. They had 6 sacks. They had a couple interceptions, so they continue to carry that team who still has 1 loss on the year. That was Penn State, got blown out 31-0.
Right.
But you look at their schedule, and they're at Wisconsin. This could be a tough one, and as we mentioned, that could decide the Big Ten West. Then Minnesota, Northwestern, Rutgers, Illinois, Nebraska. I mean, there is a scenario where Iowa is terrible on offense the entire year and goes like 11-1 or 10-2.
It makes you ask the question, right? Because if they can go 10-2 with that offense,
right?
If they had an offense that was like 60th in America, Like, what kind of team are they?
Just average,
Right? Like,
just average.
like I'm like halfway being facetious and I'm halfway serious. Like, what team are they if they have an offense that is competent?
We've seen it not
Right.
too long ago. I mean, they're a top 5 team in the country when they have that combination. Right?
That's
I mean,
kind of what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
Like, it is ridiculous the way that the defense and the special teams keeps them in games.
yeah, they don't have that though, and they're not going to have Cade McNamara. He's out for the rest of the year. So this is Deacon Hill's team from here on out. We'll see if he can improve upon that completion percentage. But Iowa does get a win. It did not matter. All right, where do we want to go next here? Only got a couple more games. Let's go to, I guess we can go to the only other game that happened today, right? This was Northwestern against Howard. Now, we did not see any of this game. And maybe it's good for Northwestern fans that we did not see it because it was only a 3-point victory in a game where I think the Wildcats were favored by 20 plus against Howard. Their starting quarterback, Ben Bryant, I don't think he played, right?
He
did not.
He was out. He had an upper body injury. It was a game-time decision. So it was another quarterback for him. Yeah, what was his name?
Brendan Sullivan.
Okay, so we're piecing this together as we go in this game.
He had a pretty efficient day. 13 for 18, 131, and 2 TDs.
How do you reconcile this, though? I mean, they have an upset, furious come-from-behind fourth-quarter victory against Minnesota and then go out and barely beat Howard by 3.
I think it's a team, honestly, that relies a lot on emotion and circumstance because, well, first off, all the things that happened in the offseason, but second off, like, you know, it's hard to get talent to Northwestern. And when you're on your backup quarterback, it becomes more difficult. And I think defensively, they have really struggled this year, regardless of where they've played well in spots. And so to get here, I don't think is shocking, but certainly below standard for that program.
Below standard. And then you look at it, kind of was the letdown in the second half. They gave up 13 points in the fourth quarter, weren't able to put any on the board. And that's really where this team from Howard came back and were able to make it a close game. And so you look at the first half, they pitch a shutout, and then they give up 20 points in the second half. You've got to make those halftime adjustments, and you have to be able to finish teams and complete games in a positive way.
There was one game yesterday, and that was Nebraska at Illinois. Pretty entertaining first half. I saw a lot of the first half. I didn't see a ton of the second half, but it was good.
Did you see the second half drive chart?
It was like punt, interception, fumble, fumble,
yes.
interception, punt, missed field goal, turnover on downs. That wasn't the order, but I think that's basically the end result of those drives. And so, Nebraska got the lead in the first half, and it's a good thing they did because the second half was a mess. But there were some good things by Nebraska in this game. Heinrich Starberg, as someone commented after our last pod, he is like the player of the podcast, the Go Big or Go Home podcast. He had 154 yards through the air, but another 82 and 1 touchdown on the ground. And so he does make enough plays for that Nebraska team that they got to win, and it looks like Illinois is going to have a rough year.
Can I get you this drive chart? I found it.
No, I love drive charts.
Okay, so we have punt, fumble, field goal, punt, field goal attempt, turnover on downs, a fumble, punt, interception, fumble, turnover on downs.
Entertaining second half.
Good defense.
Good defense.
We could say.
Or bad offense.
Well,
I mean, Illinois couldn't get the run game going. Rushed for 21 yards in this game.
That's the shocking part to me.
Me too.
Is the way that Brett Bielema builds teams that they have not been able to find success on the run. And I watched their offensive line, and it's a group that's just not playing well right now.
Right.
The backs are, I think they're trying to run it well, and they're just not getting a ton of help. And I know that's probably keeping them up at night.
Right.
But it was a big part of what they did last year to have success. They gave the ball to Chase Brown, and Tommy DeVito was able to have really good looks because of it. And again, defensively, they were also built really well with
stout.
Great personnel. And so I think it's just a down year for Illinois. Frankly.
Right. And Luke Altmaier comes into that situation, like you said. You lose a guy like Chase Brown, the production that he had, 1,600 yards on the ground last year, 10 touchdowns rushing. And you look at it and you say 21 yards rushing. Well, they're not complimenting that offense whatsoever. They're not making his job any easier. And now you've got to throw the ball to win. And guess what that means? The defense also knows you've got to throw the ball because every time they're stonewalling you, every time you run the ball, that puts a tremendous amount of pressure on a quarterback in the first year in his system to make plays on a consistent basis. And as a result, you're seeing, a lost fumble, you're seeing an interception here and there, but you can't put that much responsibility on Luke Altmaier when you don't have the complementary type offense to help supplement that pass game.
Yeah, this is what I used to tell Luke Fickles, our defensive coordinator, when I was at Ohio State. We play a team and they get behind the game or they couldn't get the run game started. I said, third down, coach. I said, we got dudes who can rush.
Right.
I said, I like the blitz, coach. I said, dial it up, right? Like, I want to put so much heat on the quarterback that he goes to the sideline, he can't breathe because he was under so much pressure. And that's what teams are doing, right? Like, if I was a coordinator going up against Illinois, job number 1, stop the run. Job number 2, fire up the quarterback. Like, that's it.
And then we saw it last week against Purdue. That's exactly what happened. It was tackles for loss. He was hit constantly. There was sacks. And you just can't play that way, because I've been in those games where it's like, oh, here they come again. And you just know that you're playing from behind. You've got to make plays, but you feel that pressure. And eventually it feels like you're going to give way and rush your throw. You're not going to be confident in the pocket. Yep. And all of a sudden, then it starts to unravel.
That's when the mistakes come.
Yep.
Limit the run, pressure the quarterback, check for Nebraska in this one. 5th time in 6 games that Nebraska has held its opponent to less than 60 yards rushing. And they had 3 sacks, 6 tackles for losses, an interception, a couple fumble recoveries. So Matt Rule, first year, I think they have potential to finish this thing looking pretty good. They got Northwestern next, then they got Purdue, then they got Michigan State, then they got Maryland, Wisconsin, and Iowa. They're 3-3 right now. I think there's a chance that Nebraska ends this year feeling pretty good about themselves.
So Matt Rule said something really interesting during the week about his team, and it wasn't necessarily a point fingers thing. It was I'm going to apply pressure because I'm the head coach thing. But he said that he has NFL guys on that roster that aren't playing that way, and they need to play that way. And so I'm curious on a week-to-week basis what type of improvements they can make. If he truly believes that he has guys on that roster that are playing at the next level in a couple of years, can they accelerate that improvement process down the line of the schedule?
Yeah, and that's the biggest part of this team is we knew that early on you're implementing a new system. You've got new coaching staff. You've got a bunch of new players through the transfer portal. And so how quickly can they adapt to this new system? How quickly can they get caught up to speed? So we knew that there was going to be some growing pains. Obviously, the situation with the quarterback has changed as well. So a new guy playing behind center. But you see the improvement, right? You see them growing in confidence. They've had some difficult games, but that's a growth opportunity for this team. And if they can start to put it together and find their identity, which I feel like they have, then this is a team that, because of the schedule and what it looks like, they can compete with most of those teams. And I wouldn't say any of those teams right there, you're sitting there and saying, oh, there's no chance, no shot.
I agree. Let's give them a bonus little snippet at the end of our Go Big or Go Home pod. Notre Dame is like an honorary Big Ten team, of course.
Of course.
We're going to be in South Bend next weekend for our big game, Notre Dame versus USC. A couple of weeks ago, I thought this could be 2 undefeated teams going toe-to-toe. Well, Notre Dame lost to Ohio State, and now they have lost for a second time against Louisville, 33-20. And Louisville's still undefeated, and this marks the 3rd straight game that Notre Dame has played an undefeated team at night in prime time. And so this is a brutal stretch for the Fighting Irish, and they put up a fight, but lose by 13. And oh, by the way, guys, this is an in-progress score. USC is down 17-7 in the second quarter at Arizona, or to Arizona. You could have 2 teams coming off losses on our big primetime game.
We'll make this an extra honorary because of Jeff Brom, who has a Big Ten tie, having coached at Purdue for the last handful of years, head coach at Louisville now, and that's his alma mater.
So we'll adopt Louisville as a Big Ten team.
Yeah, just
why
because
not?
of Jeff Brom. Reality of the situation, I think, is there wasn't a point watching this game where I felt like Notre Dame was in control. And that's a tough spot to be in as a football team. The other thing is Sam Hartman. He's been the guy that they have gone to when they needed plays. And he did it against Duke at the end of the game in very dramatic fashion. Under 60% completion, that's the number I look for college quarterbacks. It's not good enough. and then 3 interceptions. That's what gets you a lot of times.
And you've got to give credit to the Louisville defense, because when you look at it, they were outstanding on third down. Notre Dame was 3 of 13. They had 5 turnovers in this game, 3 interceptions, 2 lost fumbles. You can't win. That's not winning football when you turn over the ball 5 times against an opponent that, look, you can say what you will about Louisville, but they're an undefeated opponent, and they're at that point for a reason. And so it was a sloppy game for Notre Dame. And you just have to think also, they've been in such emotional games the last few weeks, right? And that takes its toll, right? Ohio State, and then they come back the way in which they did last week and win in a dramatic fashion against Duke, right? There's something to be said about that emotional roller coaster that you're on, and then all of a sudden to come out today and rush the ball for 44 yards as well with that dominant offensive line, because we talk about that dominant offensive line all the time. Joe Alt, Blake Fisher on the opposite side, that they can just maul people and at times look like Michigan. Well, they weren't able to do that today.
We talked about it, I think, last week about the whole emotional thing and playing at night,
right?
And back to back. And then back, right? Like this will be their 4th straight night game coming up next week. It is hard, and I've done it before. And the travel is tough. You can't get in a sleep rhythm. Like you're trying to figure out how you manage Sundays, because you played so close to when you're usually doing your Sunday routine that you're trying to manage the schedules and everything. And I think that is part of the deal here. That stuff starts to pile up. You've played really good teams, emotional games, all at night. I mean, it's the cost of doing business when you're Notre Dame, right? Like big brand, good team. Everybody wants to see it, but it's hard to be like that.
It's the cost of doing business with NBC, because that's what we did. That's what we
that's what we do.
Make you play at prime under the lights. So the big, the eye of the nation is on you, and it is very difficult for Notre Dame. But I'm still pumped up about seeing Caleb Williams next week.
I am too.
At South Bend.
Yeah, I might stay on the sideline a little bit to see him up close and in person.
He truly is a special player. I mean, he'll be the first quarterback off the board next year. He's got such a unique skill set. His ability to create is unlike anything that I've seen in the college game. And a lot of it, I hate to make any comparisons to Patrick Mahomes, but there's parts of his game, the way in which he maneuvers inside the pocket, gets outside, keeps his eyes downfield, and creates out of nothing when nothing is there, which makes him uniquely special.
Yeah, movement skill is ridiculous.
It's ridiculous. Just a feel.
Yeah, and like there are times when he's hit and most quarterbacks go down. And his contact balance, like I don't know how he stays on his feet sometimes, and then is able to get into a passing posture. And it's not a typical passing posture a lot of times, but to be able to deliver the ball accurately, I'm over here magician.
It's almost like he doesn't need a passing posture.
No, he doesn't.
Right? Every posture that he is in is a passing posture.
Damn near.
Right.
So we're going to be pumped to watch him next week. Prime time, Notre Dame. Get used to it. You're going to be in prime time quite a bit. For Matt, for Joshua, I'm Ahmed. We're done. Time to go back to the hotel.
It's a wrap.
We're out.
Go big or go home. Yeah. Go big or go home. Get your game face on. I need a seat on that throne. Go. Yeah. Leave it all on the floor. If there's a knock on the door, don't leave us in. We the boys. Let's go.